I grew up in St. Louis, Missouri, and brought my baseball passion to Boston and Dana-Farber. Took me a while, but I did finally relinquish my St. Louis Cardinals fan and became a Boston Red Sox fan. I wanted to be a nurse from the time I was a very little girl. I didn't have any nurses in my family, but reading storybooks about the early nurses in our profession, Florence Nightingale and Clara Barton, there was just such an excitement about what they did and what they accomplished and the contributions they made. So from a very early age, I wanted to be a nurse. And I worked as a candy striper as a teenager, which just solidified my passion for nursing, and went to college, and that was my major, along with psychology. So my first nursing job right out of school was in St. Louis, where I worked on an oncology unit. And that's where I fell in love with the field of oncology nursing. It was quite different at that time. I was working in an inpatient unit, and that's really where all patients with cancer came, and many of them never went home. We didn't have the same treatments in the late 70s and early 80s that we have now, and so it was similar in that you formed very important and deep relationships with your patients and their families through the process, but there weren't as many success stories then as there are now. And after a time in that role, I took a little detour in public health and did work in Latin America for several years, and then ended up in Boston in the mid-'80s and late 80s, where I have been since then. And I worked at Cambridge Health Alliance, overseeing the oncology specialty there, and some other specialties. I did hospice nursing while I was there to keep my hands in clinical practice and close to those oncology patients. And then 22 years ago almost, this opportunity at Dana-Farber came up to help grow the practice of nursing in the outpatient setting. Which was so exciting to me, because that was really when the shift from inpatient care to outpatient care was really beginning to happen, and I was very excited to come here and be part of that. So I came to Dana-Farber in 2002, and by then we were beginning to shift a lot of care from inpatient to outpatient. Our treatments were advancing, patients were doing better for longer. We were beginning to cure a lot of cancers, and it was really a very exciting time here. I came when we were still in the Dana building. All of our care was on those floors in the Dana building, in between lab floors where all the labs were, and it was very exciting, but very quickly we got, as our volumes were growing every year consistently, we outgrew that building and had to build a new building, the Yawkey Center for Cancer Care, and it was very exciting to be part of that. One of the key leaders in the field of oncology nursing was at that time, and still is today, Susan Grant, Dr. Susan Grant. She was here in the 90s and was instrumental in really solidifying that relationship that continues today, that's so deep with our patients and their families. She was very key in establishing our patient and family advisory councils with our then president, Dr. Nathan, and she really led nursing practice into a new place of really taking ownership for that patient experience. Nurses touch patients at every point of their treatment and care, and we really take it very seriously in terms of making sure that the patients and their families have the very best possible experience. And it's one of the very special things about Dana-Farber, that we are as committed to what that experience is going to be like for our patients and their families, as committed to that as we are to all the discoveries in the science that we are advancing every day. And so that 50-50 commitment and to excellent care, excellent experience, and then the science and the discoveries is makes for what is, I think, the greatest cancer center in the world that we have here. It's very, very special. Another leader, another giant in oncology nursing right here at home at Dana-Farber is Sharon Lane. Sharon Lane just retired from Dana-Farber last year, but she's the very first person I met when I came to Dana-Farber. She gave me my tour of the Institute as I was interviewing for the role, and I have to say, through all the years I've worked here, Sharon has been just an amazing wealth of expertise, knowledge, wisdom, and she has made such a difference here. I think, to me, what I think she's most noted for is her championing of patient safety. And she was here when the Institute really became very involved in improving the safety of all aspects of our care, really leading the country. And Sharon was right there as the nurse leader who really championed that and did so until the day she retired. Safety was in the forefront of her mind. She made sure that our nurses had everything they needed in their practice environment to keep the environment safe. She helped create an environment that was safe for people to come forward to say they're worried about this, or they had a near miss on this occasion, and we need to develop a system for this to make sure that we're safe. That kind of safe environment where you can be transparent and talk about either near misses or errors that actually happened is so important. And Sharon was very instrumental with the nursing staff and all of us as leaders in helping to establish that and maintain it. Pat Reed-Ponte hired me, and I came here. She was a great leader in our field of nursing. She, in her time here and the time I worked with her, she helped lead this organization to its first magnet designation. And that's the most prestigious award and honor an organization can achieve in honoring the practice of nursing, but the entire experience and care of patients. Only 9% of hospitals in this country achieve that designation, and we achieved it under Pat's leadership in 2005 for the first time, and we've been redesignated 3 times since then. Our most recent redesignation was in 2019, and we are preparing for redesignation in 2023. Well, relationship-based care is really the foundation of all of our practice, not just in nursing, but in medicine. We look at the whole patient. The patient comes to us as a whole human being with a family, with a life, and we strive to understand that patient and their family from day one. What matters to this patient? Who are they? What do they do when they're not here with us? What do they want to be doing? And how can we design their treatment plan so that we can maximize their quality of life when they're not here with us? And we like to say, we'll leave your cancer here with us while you're gone, and you'll come back, and we'll hold that, but you live your life. And we've really tried to achieve that, and you can only do that by making the kind of effort that we make, all of us that take care of patients, to really understand the person in front of us as someone much greater than the disease that they have. And we try to work with them and work with their family and meet their needs, which are unique based on their circumstances. One of the things that also distinguishes the Department of Nursing from other institutions is our Cantor Center for Nursing and Patient Care Services Research. So under Susan Grant's leadership, she was able to build and open the center with some funding from the Cantor family to begin to build the science of nursing. Nurses concern themselves, nurse researchers, with symptom science, learning and developing new evidence to help patients manage the symptoms and side effects of their disease and of the treatments that we give them. The science of caring, which is really about maximizing the quality of life for patients, we've spoken about that important emphasis placed on what is important in this patient's life and how do we maximize the quality of life that they have throughout treatment. So Susan's leadership really laid the foundation for the Cantor Center, which has grown over my 20-plus years here in funding and in our being able to recruit and attract nurse scientists who are partnered with other researchers in health services researchers and others in the Institute, and also with schools of nursing. We have developed in the last 10 years a very strong partnership with the University of Massachusetts, Boston, and have a shared faculty position that we and a postdoctoral fellowship for doctorally prepared nurses to begin their careers in studying these areas and developing new evidence in our care in the practice of nursing, our care of oncology patients. So that's a big distinguisher for us here, and we continue to develop and grow. Now, under the leadership of Dr. Marilyn Hammer, the Cantor Center continues to grow and get their grants funded, and it's a very, very vibrant center today. We're at a very exciting time in nursing right now. Some would say a concerning time because we are experiencing a nursing shortage across the United States. However, Dana-Farber continues to be a place that is able to recruit and retain the best nurses. As we look to the future, though, and similarly to the general population, there are a lot of nurses who are retiring. There are a lot of the baby boomer generation that are retiring from nursing and will become consumers of healthcare, not providers of healthcare. And so we're looking to and have been developing some very innovative ways to both assure that we can train and mentor and develop the next generation of oncology nurses, but also and do it in a way that will meet the needs of the patients that are going to be coming to us in our future. So we've developed a partnership with UMass Boston, which is the most diverse campus of the UMass system. And with UMass and with our own work with our clinic assistants in nursing, who are also our most diverse employees, we are working to increase our nurse residency program that we instituted in 2016 and expand it to offer scholarships and a year of very specialized training for new graduate nurses in oncology, so that at the end of that year of protected time and learning and extra clinical training, they're able to practice in our environment and will be able to meet the not just the clinical needs of our patients, but also their cultural needs and linguistic needs. As we diversify, as you said, we attract patients from around the world and around our city, and they come with very diverse needs. So it's very exciting to be part of developing the next generation of oncology nurses here at Dana-Farber, and to be able to do it in a way that will encompass the broad diversity of our patients that we care for. As cancer therapies change, of course, our practice must change. And over the past 6 years, we have really developed the role of the oncology nurse navigator. And this role is one that of a registered nurse that meets the patient and the family, probably the first person a nurse they talk to when they make their appointment. They receive a call from a nurse to give them a little understanding of what to expect when they come for their first visit. And that nurse, that navigator, will follow them through treatment, sometimes in the clinic, sometimes at home over phone calls to help manage symptoms or side effects, answer questions, help navigate the many stops that patients make along the way during their treatment for scans or procedures, either here or in other hospitals. And that individual is really sort of the touchstone, the rock that the family can keep going back to get their questions answered. And it's not necessarily always in person. It can be by phone. It can be by Zoom, that technology that's now becoming so much more a part of care. It's all, again, about that relationship, knowing that patient, knowing that family, understanding what their treatment course is going to be, and being available to answer the questions and help guide the patient's care so that they are feeling as well as and optimizing their health as much as possible through treatment. So that's one way. I think with the advent of oral chemotherapy, it did pose some new challenges for us, certainly for nurses in teaching patients. They were taking their medications at home instead of in front of us. But there's still a lot of therapies that are combination infusional therapy as well as an oral agent. So we do still see patients, and like I said, sometimes it's in person, sometimes it's over the phone, but we'll never lose that connection. But that's so important for the safety and the quality of care. So the last 2 years have been just immensely challenging. And as I say to my staff, I've never been more proud to be a nurse, and I've never been more exhausted in being a nurse. And I think our frontline nurses showed up every day, no matter what. They were extraordinary. It's hard to put into words what they did. To start with, at the beginning of the pandemic, our inpatient nurses at the Brigham were redeployed. They opened up the first COVID unit to take care of our patients who were diagnosed with COVID. And they worked in those units day in and day out. In those early days, we didn't really understand what we were dealing with, and they rose above their fear and were there for their patients. And as the months went on, we had to close our doors to visitors. We moved every single employee off-site that we could to keep our environment safe. But the people that were there on the front line every day were our nurses. And they became the social worker for the patient. They became the chaplain for the patient. They became the family member. They were often holding the phone for the family member who was out in their car or out on the street. We had fortunately, we have big windows, and we could bring our patients to the windows to wave to their family members on the street. But it was very challenging for our staff. And it's at times like this that I think you see Dana-Farber staff come together in a breathtaking way. And I think our nurses and our nurse practitioners did that all through the pandemic. They did it with their physician colleagues and other colleagues too. Pharmacy was here, and they made sure that our environment was safe, that no matter what was going on with this virus, that our doors would still be open for our patients, and that we could continue to treat our patients with cancer treatments that they so desperately needed. So I couldn't be more proud of those moments. I'm glad that we are emerging from them. We all are. But at the same time, there is a pride, I think, in all of us in this institution when we look back and reflect on how our nurses and our physicians and others really stood up, stood together, and made it possible to continue to treat our patients. I'll tell you one moment that sticks out to me as a special, treasured moment as a Dana-Farber nurse. And it was when we threw out the first pitch, several of my nurse colleagues and I, with our patients. We each got to bring one of our patients to Fenway Park, and we all went out on the field and threw out the first pitch together. To be able to bring your patient and go to Fenway Park with your colleagues and throw out the first pitch, that was just an incredibly memorable moment. And it's that, partnership with the patient that is so embedded in everything we do. I think that's why it's hard to pick out any one example, because it's our patients are with us, and their voice is in the forefront of and guides everything that we do. So that was a wonderful moment. We have an amazing environment and sense of teamwork in oncology. We often refer to it that oncology is a team sport, and it really is a team sport. We've done formal training actually here in working together because and recognizing that every single member of the team has a critical role to play in the overall care of the patient. And so it's extraordinary in that way. It's a very respectful environment. We try to level the playing field all around. We train our clinical assistants as they come in. They're often some of the first employees that a patient interacts with at their visit. And what they do when they have that patient in front of them, they are leading the team. They are taking their vital signs. Those vital signs are going to be used later to develop doses for treatment. And they do a lot of screening and conversation with patients, a very significant amount of putting patients at ease as they come in, because often they're very anxious. And then they're handing off that patient to a nurse or a doctor or a nurse practitioner or a physician assistant. And everyone works together, all focused on our patients who are really what we come to work for every day. And so that sense of teamwork and collaboration is very both important for the quality of care, but it is also important for the quality of the environment, the practice environment, and the satisfaction and appreciation we all have to be part of a team that's making a difference with patients.